Greetings, Biz101 students. Today we're going to be talking about management. How we get things done through organizations, through people and resources, and how different types of management are applied within organizations. This is a topic I'm very passionate about. It's one of my personal specialties along with human resource management, and I think it's something that's increasingly vital to the success of organizations. So let's jump in. Think about this for a second. If you can think about a leader that you respect, it could be somebody in the business world, the sports world, the entertainment world. Think about somebody you respect and why in terms of leadership. One of the folks I respect, although he's a controversial figure, is Elon Musk. Why do I respect him so much? Because he's creative, he's visionary, he's not afraid to try new things and to change the way the industry works. I'm also a big fan of Daymond John. Daymond John, who was on Shark Tank, the guy who started FUBU clothing brand. This guy was a visionary, saw a niche in the market and a customer base that was not being addressed and went for it. There are lots of different reasons you might like or respect leadership. It could be their intelligence or their vision, their charisma, or their kindness. What you respect is a very highly individualized thing. However, some of these common traits are what make people into great leaders within companies. And leaders and managers are not necessarily the same thing. Leadership and management are not necessarily the same thing. So what makes somebody a good leader? Well, we're going to be talking about a lot of the technical senses of that in this chapter, but a leader has to do a lot of different things. Somebody who is a good leader is a visionary who can set a course for an organization, can get people to follow them, can get people to get behind a vision to change the way they think, and to really set a course for a company or an organization to follow. But they also have to be humans as well. They have to be people who can inspire people or advise them or be good coaches, motivate people to do the best of their abilities. Somebody who's a leader can theoretically do all of these things. So it's a very important skill set that at times is much as an art as a science. So what are we going to be talking about in this chapter? We're going to be talking about what management actually does and how managers contribute to organizations, the types of planning that managers participate in, and what the main functions of managers are. We're also going to talk about getting beyond managers and into leadership, and talking about how these individuals, the leaders of companies, can influence the culture of the company. We're also going to be talking about how managers and leaders can control activities, including the structures in place. We're also going to be talking about the different roles that managers play depending on the needs thrust upon them and where they're at in an organization, and why management is so important now and in the future. Management, in my opinion, along with accounting, is one of the two most fundamental parts of the world of business, because getting things done through other people is what management is all about. You'll hear me repeat that definition several times in the course of our discussions, because I think it's a very important distinction between leadership and management. We'll get more into that as we get into the chapter. So what is management? Again, according to our text, management is the idea of guiding development, maintenance, and allocation of resources to attain organizational goals. I like to shorten it by the old school definition: management is getting things done through other people. In other words, a large company, despite how powerful the CEO or the president could be, a company cannot run completely on one person. We've seen the risk of having too much of a company tied up in one person's personality. In reality, it takes many people to make modern organizations run, and managers are people who can get things done through other people. So when we're talking about the management process, the managerial process, I should say, the first we look at is how to anticipate problems and opportunities. What are things we're going to have to fix? What are places we can grow the company? And can we get plans to make the best of those? Well, if we're making those plans, how do we coordinate people and resources to be able to make our plans work? For example, we know we want to expand our plant and make more product. We got to hire people and we got to train them. Then we've also got to guide personnel through the implementation process. That means we're building a new subsidiary, we're building a new production line, we're building new capabilities in our organization. We have to train people, develop them, and guide them through. And finally, we have to look back and see, what did we do well, what do we need to change, and implement those changes. So it's a perpetual process in the world of management. So managers are concerned with efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency means we're getting things done economically. Effectiveness means we're getting a desired result. And the example I would use here, you can swat a fly with either a fly swatter or a bowling ball. If you hit it with a fly swatter and kill the fly, that's very efficient. If you hit it with a bowling ball, it'll also kill the fly. It takes a lot more energy and expensive apparatus. So again, in the modern organization, we're concerned with both. We want to accomplish the mission. We want to be effective, but we also want to use our resources efficiently because they are limited. So these are the 4 areas that managers typically work within, and we're going to be covering these 4 areas within the course of this chapter. So managers plan, organize, lead, and control. So when you plan, and we'll go through each of these sections in some detail, you're basically setting a course or setting a change course or getting ready to do something new. When you're organizing the change, you're basically setting the framework in motion. How do we make this change happen? What tasks need to happen? Who do we need to hire? Then we lead the change. It means that we're motivating people. We're serving as role models. We're managing this process. And controlling means once we've got this change in place, that we are monitoring it and that we are making sure that we're making changes and keeping efficiencies and improving as we go along. So management does all 4 of these things. And what happens if we do these things well? We have an organization that's effective. It accomplishes its goals, but it's also efficient, means we're doing them hopefully at a profit. If we're a for-profit organization, if we're a non-profit, at least we're doing it in a way that preserves as many resources as possible. And if we do all that well, we meet the goals of the organization. So management, again, is the idea of getting things done through other people. And we're going to be covering the 4 key functions of management and the way that managers interact with organizations as we continue going. Again, we start talking about planning. Planning means that we're looking at how to take advantage of a situation. We're looking how to deal with potential threats. We are looking at how to make a change or react to a change in our organization. And we have to come up with strategies to meet that. So for example, if we realize we're a technology company and we don't make smartphones, maybe we should be making smartphones. Maybe we should plan to launch our own smartphone division, for example. Strategic planning means that you're looking out at the long goals, the big picture. You're looking 1 to 5 years out. These days, strategic planning could be a year to 2 years because the world of business moves pretty quick these days. In the old days, you'd be talking about 5 years, for example. But if you're looking long term, you're talking strategic planning. Remember, more than a year generally is strategic planning. What does it involve? It involves us looking at the big picture goals, the broad goals as they state, to look what we want to accomplish and what resources we're going to need. What guides this process is our mission statement, which is a statement of writing what our company stands for. What are we all about? Why do we exist? And we oftentimes, we get into our strategic planning, start with the most fundamental of management analyses, and it's called a SWOT analysis. And I would write this down because it almost always shows up on an exam. SWOT, S-W-O-T, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we're looking at our strengths. What are we good at? What can we leverage? Weaknesses. Where do we have lack of something? Where is a place we can improve? Opportunities. Are there markets that we're positioned well to sell in that we have not chosen to sell in yet? Threats. Do we have competitors who are looking to come in and eat our lunch? All those things are the basics of strategic planning. Again, a year or more is strategic planning. And tactical planning means once we've come up with a strategic plan, we're coming up with shorter term plans to implement the strategic plan. That's a tactical plan. And those are plans of less than 1 year, and they're supporting the bigger goals. So an example would be if we wanted to start that new smartphone division, for example, that's our strategic goal. Our tactical goal might be, for example, getting our computer chip manufacturing division set up to make chips for smartphones. So they're smaller, no less important, but smaller, more defined types of plans. Operational plans means those are the ways that we plan for daily operations. They're things that we do every day. We're setting up basic procedures. For example, operational planning would be if we're manufacturing those new chips as part of our tactical planning. What's our operation going to look like? What's our assembly line going to look like? We also need to, in this particular setting, come up with what we refer to as contingency plans. And that means that you've got a backup plan. why are these such important concepts today? Well, we've just started finding our way out of a pandemic, something that nobody could have anticipated would have had the effects on business that it has. And so the old expression, the old cliche is once bitten, twice shy. That means when you get hurt, if a dog bites you, you're going to be more careful around dogs for the foreseeable future. So more businesses now are coming up with contingency plans. If they had to shut down, how could they possibly continue operating if people couldn't be in the office? So again, if we're looking at the types of planning, strategic 1 to 5 years, the big cheeses in the company, the CEO, vice presidents, anybody in the so-called C-suite are going to be looking at those kinds of plans. Tactical, we're looking with middle management, we're looking down at strategic business units. Operational means the individual supervisors are implementing aspects of the bigger strategic plan that involve daily operations. And contingency planning means that we have a backup plan in case the you-know-what hits the fan, that we have a way to continue operating. So those are the differences in the type of planning. So what about a mission statement? We talked about how a mission statement guides an organization. This is an example from Twitter, for example, of how their mission statement guides what they do. All companies have mission statements, whether they're written down or not. The mission is what the company is all about, what it exists to do, why is the company there in the first place. And the mission statement should be closely tied to what the company is all about. Companies who get too far away from the missions often fail. For example, when companies expand into areas that maybe they're not that good at, it doesn't always work out well for them. Microsoft, for example, was never a mobile-focused company, and that's why their smartphones typically have not done well. Sometimes companies get away from what they were all about in the first place, or over-expand, or over-diversify. So again, we talked about planning, we talked about the types of planning. We're going to keep moving here, because we just covered the first of the 4 areas in planning, and next we're going to move into organizing, how we get this stuff put together. Organizing means we've got to put our resources together in some sort of logical framework to be able to make good use of them. Examples of that would be how many shifts do we need working? What kinds of people should we be hiring for our company? And we look at how we can divide up this work. For example, if you're a manager, you're going to be creating what we refer to as divisional labor. How do we split up a task? If we're making cars, is one unit making engines and another making axles or doors? What about grouping jobs and employees? So we're going to create departments that support the division of labor. So we might have, for example, in a university, we have a school of business, and then we also have a school of health sciences that teach different things. There are different departments. And then we're also going to assign authority and responsibility. So we have managers and subordinates, people who can delegate responsibilities to other people. And that's all part of organizing. So if you look at how the management pyramid actually works, they tend to be, they start at the bottom and work their way up. Where you see the bottom of the pyramid is bigger, meaning there's more of it. There are more supervisors, more first-line supervisors in most organizations than there are middle management, than there are people in the C-suite. So let's talk about this. People who are first-line supervisors or front-line supervisors, however you want to refer to it, are the people on the floor supervising actual work being done. There's always going to be more people who are supervisors or foremen or team leaders or what have you. Middle management, those are the people who basically serve as the buffer between supervisors and top management. There's fewer of them because they manage units. They manage more people, and they report back to top management. And again, top management, there we see the C-suite, the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, the chief operational officer, and a big important one these days, the chief information officer. And we're talking about people who are at the top, the tip of the pyramid, fewer of them, but they carry more power. And again, we call this the C-suite. So I'm a big fan of middle managers, not just because I used to be one, although that is part of the reason. Middle managers are people who can speak both languages. They can speak technical and they can speak manager. They can speak executive. They can speak rank and file. They're the people who try to balance the profit goals of the organization with the goals of the individuals who are doing the job and to make sure everybody has a voice. These are very important people, especially at the speed with which companies are running these days. I like to think of them as secret weapons because their utility, they're right in the middle. So again, we talked about how management is organized and how we have middle, top, and supervisory management in the pyramid. So moving on, we just covered planning and organizing. Now we're getting into what leadership is all about. Let's get into it. Leadership means you can motivate people to do what the organization was set up to do. And anybody in an organization can be a leader. You don't have to be in the C-suite to be a leader. Sometimes the people who work on the manufacturing line, there's that one woman or man who carries influence over others. They're the folks who are the opinion leaders, the folks who get people to follow them, the people who are able to get people to emulate their behavior. They don't always have to be the most well-paid or important people in the organization by title, but they are often the most important based on the fact that people put a lot of stock in what they do. Unpopular opinion in the modern world of management and leadership, I do feel that people are either born leaders or not. Somebody who's a born leader can be developed into a better leader, but I don't necessarily think that leaders can be made. I have plenty of folks in the management field who disagree with what I just said, and I gladly have that discussion with any of them. But there are lots of ways to lead. Managers, however, are not always leaders. Somebody gets promoted into the title of manager means it's their responsibility to get things done through other people. It doesn't mean they're setting big audacious goals. It doesn't mean they've got a big vision for the future. They are people who make sure things get done. Now, managers are not always leaders. Leaders are not always managers. In an ideal situation, when you have a good manager, that person is also a leader as well, and vice versa. That's an ideal that does not always happen. So, people who are managers or leaders have different kinds of power, different ways in which they exert influence over people. We got legitimate power, which means if I'm the president of the organization, my title is my legitimate power. I have the ability to make big decisions and to fire people and to change the way the company runs based on my title. Then we've got reward power. By the way, managers and leaders sometimes can have more than one kind of power. Reward power means, this person can control whether or not I get a raise or get a day off. That's reward power. Coercive power means, I can threaten to fire you if somebody does not do what I ask them to do. So coercive power. And by the way, coercive power is one I feel in the long term is the least effective. If you manage through negative motivation, telling people do this or you'll get fired, do this or you get punished, you will not create an environment where you have excellence. You will ultimately create an environment where people will do whatever it takes to not get in trouble, and they will never come to their full potential. Then you've got expert power. For example, the person who's in charge of Impossible Foods, makers of the Impossible Whopper, he's a vegetarian, but he's also a scientist. And people respect him because he is an expert. And then we get to referent power, which means somebody is charismatic or dynamic or people just love them. Oprah Winfrey is a great example of somebody with referent power because she's charismatic, people admire her, and she inspires good in people. So there are different kinds of power. Ultimately, a lot of leaders have multiple types of power. What type of power you respect most is up to you. In my personal opinion, I tend to respect people from two points more than others. Expert and referent. I respect people who know what they're doing, who are experts in their field, and I respect people who have the charisma to inspire others. Although legitimate power is important, I don't put a lot of stock in titles. I think generally speaking, most managers ultimately have reward power. I certainly don't have a lot of respect, at least in higher levels of organizations, for managers who get by on coercive power. That's my opinion. You are welcome to have a different opinion. So again, these types of power also lead to different styles of management. Autocratic means you're telling people exactly what to do. There is no wiggle room. I'm telling you how to do your job. I'm telling you when to do your job, and you better do it exactly how I say, and I don't want your feedback. Autocratic. They may say to yourself, that sounds terrible. Are there any advantages? Well, there are some advantages. People who are autocratic, you never have to guess what they're thinking. They set what will get you a reward in terms of what you have to do to get that raise, very specific because they're specific kind of people. In the middle, we have what we refer to as democratic or consensual or consultative leadership, also known as participative style. That means you've got sort of a democracy. The leader is willing to listen to input. The leader is willing to listen to what you have to say and even make compromises. The advantages here is that people feel like they have some stake in their own fate. They have some control of the company. They have some ability to make change. Then we get to the other far end, which is laissez-faire leadership, free reign. That means the manager says, go get it done. I don't care how you get it done. Do what you want. On one hand, some employees really like this because they feel very autonomous. They can do whatever they want. On the other hand, people sometimes don't get much in the way of direction, and they can have a hard time dealing with the ambiguity. In other words, I don't know if I'm doing this right or wrong. I don't know if I'm hitting the mark. It can be very frustrating to people as well. My preferred style is participative, but different industries and different people prefer different things. Somebody who works in a factory, for example, the autocratic style might be just fine for them. Somebody who's a highly creative artist might like the free reign style because they have strong belief in themselves. So again, and I'm sorry you can't see this arrow in the bottom, but when you go autocratic, the leader has all the power. When you go free reign, more power is in the hands of the followers, and participative is right in the middle. So let's talk about this. What kind of power does this person have? We've got people like Professor Patrick because he lives by his word and is friendly to everyone. What kind of power does he have? I would say he probably has referent power. People think he's a pretty cool dude. They like hanging out with him. So again, referent power. What type of power do we have here? People listen to Vanessa because her title is the president. She has got a legitimate title, which means she's got legitimate power. We have Jim, who threatens his workers with punishment and threats of unemployment. Do what I say or you're going to get punished. What is he doing? He's coercing people. He's got coercive power. Jill's coworkers listen to her because she can write code like nobody else for computers and apps for smartphones. She knows what the heck she's doing because she's an expert and has expert power. And finally, we have Randy, who's got the power to give raises and promotions. What kinds of things can he do? He can give rewards. He's got reward power. So speaking of power, I should say, today is the age of employee empowerment. It means the more autonomy you give someone, you're giving them an opportunity to make decisions and take some control over the organization. And when you share this kind of decision-making power, most people like the idea that they're getting a little bit of decision-making power. It's like your organization saying to you, we trust you, we believe in you, we have faith in what you can do. A great example I like to use. I am a big fan of Sheetz Corporation. I know I have probably some folks in this call who are Wawa people or 7-Eleven people. I'm a Sheetz freak. I was in line for a cup of coffee one day. I was going over to the coffee machine to get my brew, and they did not have the kind of coffee I wanted. It wasn't ready. This is back before all the machines were digital. A lady working there came over to me and said, look, I could see that you didn't get the coffee you wanted. She handed me a coupon for a free coffee and said, the next one's on me. Sheetz had empowered her to make things right by the customer without having to ask for permission, even though she was just a counter employee. She was somebody who was not managerial. She was somebody who was not in the C-suite, but she was empowered to make the organization better and more responsive to its customers. As a result, I ended up loving Sheetz even more because I got a free cup of coffee simply because they didn't have the kind I wanted. These things produce in the long term what we refer to as a corporate culture. We think about cultures. If you go to any country in the world, a country has a culture. They have a system of attitudes and behaviors and standards. Well, we have them within companies as well, and they evolve kind of naturally over time. And some of it, a large part of it actually, is based on the people who founded the company. An example, Steve Jobs, the guy who started Apple, brilliant guy, but very demanding, very workaholic culture. And to this day, Apple is a high-demand culture that expects accountability. And the way that people in companies lead affect the culture. If the people who lead the company are compassionate, patient people, their managers probably will be as well. So we can see evidence of culture in who we idolize. For example, we've got Steve Jobs from Apple. We could talk about myths, people who would tell stories about the company's founding or how things happen, and their symbols. One of the best ones I could think of in terms of symbols would be the Nike swoosh, for example. And ceremonies as well. If you recognize your employees, if you commonly pull your employees together to recognize somebody's good work, that's indicative of the kind of corporate culture you have. So we talked about culture and empowerment and all these different aspects of management. That means we have one more area to get into, which is controlling, a very important part of management as well. Controlling means we got to figure out if we're spending good money, if we're spending our money well, if we're getting results. It means we're monitoring the plans we've set out to implement and seeing how well we're hitting the mark. It's like a report card. It's a score sheet. Every year, you guys do idea evals for your teachers to tell them if they hit the mission and hit the goals that the class was all about. It's the same kind of thing, and it's a big, important part. So how does the control process work? It's for the organization and the individual employee. The first is we're setting performance goals and standards. If you're McDonald's, how many hamburgers do you have to make an hour? How high quality do they have to be? We're going to measure them. Well, we're going to watch our employees and see how many hamburgers they are making per hour. We're going to compare actual performance to established performance standards. McDonald's says you should be making 200 hamburgers an hour, and our team's making 250. We are exceeding the standard. We're going to take corrective action. If we had a McDonald's that was supposed to be making 200 burgers an hour, was only hitting 180, something's got to get fixed. It's either poor employee performance, poor instruction, or maybe the standard itself is wrong. And we're going to improve the standards in the long run. We're going to make sure we're measuring the right things. For example, let's say we were making 200 burgers an hour. We discover if we reduce it to 195, the burgers are better and customers like them better. Then we have to adapt and change the standard. This is the control process. So in the managerial role in this process, you've got several potential roles you can play. You got the information role, the interpersonal role, and the decision role. Information means you're spreading information through a company. Interpersonal means you're building relationships, and decision means you're making decisions on what's going to happen within the company. So if you got an information role, somebody, for example, is going to monitor performance. They're going to let the staff know about what's going on within the company, including new standards and procedures. So you're disseminating information. You're the disseminator, and you're also the monitor. And then you're the spokesperson. Management has said we're going to have these changes to our healthcare, and you're going to report it to the staff as well. In terms of the interpersonal role, this is the cult of personality, meaning you got to be the face of the company. You're the leader, the person who motivates them, and you're also the liaison, the person who goes between inside and outside the organization, or maybe even within the organization. So a liaison is somebody who maybe goes to the board of directors and carries messages from the staff about how well things are working. Then we get to the decision-making roles. The decision-making roles meaning a manager is going to make a decision whether or not we're going to continue with a new product line. Disturbance handler. We got people who are having problems with each other. We're gonna deal with that stuff in-house. We're gonna deal with disturbances. Resource allocator means we're gonna decide which departments get more resources. And I apologize because the bottom line, the negotiator part is cut off from the slide, but the bottom decision role is negotiator. That means somebody who might have to go out and deal with suppliers or negotiate with a labor union to get compromise. So those are examples of the decision-making role. So we talked about how control process is important and why it's so important to the organization. Let's talk about the types of decisions you might have to make. Program decisions are things that are routine. Well, we have to decide based on the sales forecast how many packages of ball bearings do we need to order to manufacture cars. If we expect we're going to sell 2,500 cars this quarter, how many cases of ball bearings do we need to buy for the wheels? And then we've got non-program decisions, which means something is coming up that we haven't seen before. Like, do we have to send everybody home because this disease called COVID is hitting the country? Or is there a shortage of a supply that we were able to count on? Are we going to be able to find a new supplier? Those are non-program decisions, things that we don't do every day. How does the decision-making process happen? Well, the first is to define what is the actual problem. What is the decision we're making? Then we're going to look at what could be potential solutions. So let's say our first problem is we are running out of beef for our McDonald's. There's a beef shortage. Well, what are our possible solutions? We could try to find another supplier of beef. We could try a vegetable-based burger and get people to try that. Or we could promote our chicken sandwiches. At that point, we're going to select which way we're going to go. We've decided we're going to promote the plant-based burger and try to get people to use that as an alternative. Maybe we'll even give them a price break on it to get them to try it. Then we'll put the plan into action. We're going to start incentivizing people to eat plant-based burgers and get the marketing plan going. And we're going to look at our sales. Did our sales stay the same, increase, or decrease? Did we fix the problem that we were having when we had a beef shortage? So again, we got lots of different roles that managers play in this whole process. When you get into what skills are required, generally speaking, the closer to the bottom of the pyramid you are, the more technical skills you need. The higher you get to the point of the pyramid, the more you need to think about strategic issues and be a big picture thinker who can think about multiple systems at the same time. It gets more complex and more strategic as you move up. And again, look at this. We got supervisors. They have to have high levels of technical skills and some human skills. Middle management. They have to have human skills to be able to talk tech with these guys and conceptual skills to be able to talk with these guys up in top management. Finally, the top management folks need to have interpersonal skills, but the biggest ones are more conceptual. So again, goes to the top of the pyramid. So what are the technical skills that you would have? We call them KSAs, and this stands for knowledge, skills, and abilities, or knowledge, skills, and aptitudes. So those are the technical skills it takes to do the job. Then we got human relation skills. Can you talk with people? Can you read their emotions? Do you have high emotional intelligence? Can you motivate people? And conceptual skills means we can understand how all parts of the company interact and work together. For example, if you're the president of St. Francis University, you can understand how academics, athletics, and operations all intersect, and they have different specialties, but they all have to work together for a healthy, happy campus. And again, those are the basic skills we have. Then we get into crisis management. And that means sometimes things come apart so far that you've got to deal with an event that you could not possibly have anticipated. Again, hopefully we have contingency plans in place to deal with the crises that hit when we have a pandemic. And a lot of leaders over the years have given good advice on how to deal with crises. I'm not going to read these to you other than to say sometimes in leadership and management you got to expect the unexpected. What's transforming the way we work? Well, technology. For example, we hit 2020 and all of a sudden we're sending the entire workforce home. What we discovered is that all this remote technology that we've been dealing with for all these years to be able to allow people to work remotely paid off and actually worked really well. Wasn't maybe the way a lot of us wanted to work, but it certainly allowed us to remain productive. In fact, it's changing the way we work to this day. And the fact that companies are questioning if they need big office spaces anymore. In the modern workplace, most companies are touching more than one continent when they work because we have suppliers and labor all over the world. And it comes down to the idea of having to have global management skills. And it means people need to be willing to learn how to be sensitive to other cultures. That can even happen within a country. We've got different cultures between the Northeast United States and the Southwest. We've got the Northeast, which is a very formal, a very punctual business culture, and the Southwest, which is more laid back and kind of warm and fuzzy. So it gets even more complicated between countries, for example. So folks, that is our chapter on leadership and management. Thanks so much for your time and attention. I look forward to working with you.